Hi, everybody. Welcome to 7 Habits for Highly Effective Soldiers. My name is Louis Alvarez, and on behalf of our state chaplain, Chaplain Paul Miner, and our Massachusetts National Guard chaplaincy team, I want to welcome you to our session today. So again, we're doing 7 Habits for Highly Effective Soldiers or Airmen if you're joining us from the air side. So essentially this curriculum, you may have heard of the book 7 Habits for Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. So the company, Franklin Covey, took their book and kind of teamed up with the military, and they made this curriculum for soldiers or for military personnel, essentially. So this version is actually an even shorter version based on the first 3 habits. They call their private victory, because it focuses on the self, on our habits, on my habits. So habits 1 through 3, but I'm gonna go through all the different habits. I'll touch on all of them a little bit, but so I hope you enjoy our curriculum, and I hope that you join us for one of our in-person where we take the full curriculum, and you're able to many times stay at a hotel, and you can bring your children, and so we provide free care for the children, daycare for the children. So again, I hope that you enjoy this training. I think the curriculum's phenomenal. It's highly valuable. So we're going to take a look at these 7 habits. I'm truly happy you're joining me for this one, and hopefully you enjoy it. So what we have is, you're going to have different slides. You're going to see the slides, and then some materials. You're going to have this booklet right here that you can go through and write different things down in it, thoughts. I might be pointing you to certain pages where you can write different things down. Because what we're doing is working on certain habits that make us more effective people, more effective soldiers, more effective family members. Let's go ahead. We can get started. So during this training, you might hear a lot of things that you might be well aware of, things that you've heard before, but the importance, the value out of this comes out of putting the things that we talk about, so those habits and the different topics that we talk about, into practice. So here we go. If you look over onto page 1, and we're taking a look at slide 2 here. If you look at that, so ultimately we want to win that game of life, right? And that's what it says at the top of the slide. So winning the game of life, and it essentially tells us, this curriculum tells us that at the beginning we start down at the bottom at survival, as you can see there, and over time, as we begin to develop the good habits, we move up into stability. Eventually, we want to be at success, obviously, achievement and purpose, and then at the end of it, significance, where we're contributing for fulfillment, we're developing other people, we are pouring into other people. So that's ultimately where we want to get. So we're going to take a look at some of the things that are going to help us get there. And we'll begin with the basics on this following slide. So if you go to page 2, in your books, page 2 kind of looks like this. All right. So on that page 2 in your books, you're going to see the basics. And on this slide, you can see here. So essentially, this curriculum tells us that every human being only needs 3 basic things in order to survive. Okay? And those 3 basic things are your values, your views, and your habits. Okay? So values, views, and habits. And you can see what some of those break down to right there in that definition, but let's take a look at them a little more closely, okay? So that first basic are your values. So we get to look at those values. So those are the things, as it says there, these are the things that are most important to you. So I want you to take just a quick 30 seconds, okay? And in your book, write down the 3 most important things to you. The 3 most important things to you. If you can't think of one or the other, just write down the ones that come to your mind that are most important to you, and then you can come back and adjust them or add the one that you may be missing. So go ahead, write down those 3 things that are most important to you. All right. So if we move on to that next slide, the next basic are your views, okay? And as you can see there, it's how you see your life, your family, and yourself is your point of view. So this curriculum, this Franklin Covey calls it, essentially it's your perspective or your paradigm. It is what you are working with in terms of how you view things. It is your point of view on many different things, and it affects how we view life in general. Okay, so how we view ourselves, how we view our family members, how we view everything around us. Okay, so essentially, it's kind of like you see the picture of that soldier there. It's kind of like having a pair of glasses on. Okay, so you view things through a certain lens, and it affects how we go about life. Okay, so that's your next basic. We're going to be taking a look at all these things a little further. So if we go on to that next slide, okay, it continues on with this views. It talks about having limited views. So it says here, seeing only what is wrong with yourself is called a limited view. Seeing only what is wrong with ourselves is called a limited view. So if you go to page 3, you see a set of questions there. And if you take a look at that first question, okay, so it says, do you see yourself as patient? And I'd assume that some of us might put, so it gives you your choices. It says rarely, sometimes, and frequently. I'd assume that some of us would put rarely. Seeing this in this type of manner is having a limited view of ourselves. If I asked you, hey, listen, go back and think about it, think about the times when you've been patient. Maybe you will still put rarely, and you know what you need to work on. But some others of you might think about a certain amount of times that you have been patient, and instead you should have sometimes. So we don't want to have too lofty of a view of ourselves, but at the same time we don't want to put ourselves down. So you want to sit there and you want to think and not have a limited view of yourself. Try to think of yourself in a realistic manner, and think about those wins that we do have, and try to build upon them. Okay, so we want to have a clearer view of ourselves, and essentially we can make changes. And if we want to make small changes, this tells us work on changing our behaviors. Some of them will work, some of them may not work. But if we want to make big changes, we want to focus on our paradigms. The way that we see things, the way that we see life in general is going to make a big change in our lives. So if we change the way we see things, big changes will come about. It's essentially like that resiliency training for my Army folks that are watching this. That resiliency trainer tells us to hunt for the good stuff. hunt for the good stuff. So on constantly be looking out for the good things, and these are the things that we got to focus on. Okay, so if we go on to this next slide, I want you to take a look at it for a few seconds. Okay, and it says, what do you really see? All right, so I'll give you guys a couple of seconds there so you can take a look at it. And right away, I know you saw more than likely one of two things. Okay, some of you saw maybe both of them. Okay, but you can see there on the left side, there's a man playing a saxophone. Okay, and then on the other side, some of you saw the face of a young lady. Some of you may have seen both of them. But essentially, continue on with that limited view. So it just depends on how we see things, how we look at things. So, and there's two things that I want you to take out of this. So conditioning affects our perceptions. So when we get used to things and seeing them a certain way, we get accustomed, and it affects our perceptions. It affects how we see things. Okay, so we want to constantly be looking out for good things. And then number two, our views and our paradigms are sources of our attitudes and our behaviors. So we want to continually, once again, be focusing on the good things, because this is the source. It is the source of our attitudes and our behaviors. So again, that Army resiliency piece, focusing on the good things, hunting for the good things, continually being out on the lookout for those. So guys, these are our habits. If we go on to the next slide, it says get in the habit. Okay, so get in the habit, we change our model. We change the way we see things in order to be more effective. To be more effective people, this is the way we do it. So this is our change model right here. And you can see there it says see, get, do. What does that mean? See, get, do. What does that mean? So it is the way we see things. We change the way we see things. We do the way we do things. We change the way we do things, and that's our behavior. Okay, and then finally, when we do those two things, we get results. Okay, we get big results, and all of our it all goes back to our principles. Right there, right in the middle. Okay, so the way we live things out based on our principles will affect all these things. So continuing on to the next slide, our basics or our habits. Okay, so that last basic. So we had three basics, right? So our views, our values, and then finally our habits. Okay, so a habit is something you do over and over again, and you guys know these. So like for instance, the way you write things down, the way you fold your arms, or the way you brush your teeth. These are habits that you've formed over time. We all have habits, or all of us, really all of us have some good habits. And at the same time, all of us have certain habits that we would all agree that we would like to change. Okay, so that's why we're doing this, so that again we take a look at the 7 habits for highly effective people. These are general ones or specific ones in this curriculum, but it's the habits that we have that make us effective are the ones that we're looking at, and we want to develop that in a way that our habits are ones that are making us more effective. Okay, so we move over onto page 4. As we move over onto page 4, we're going to take a look at this next slide. And this next slide says 7 habits of an ineffective person. So on that page 7, you're going to see, on the left-hand side, you're going to see the 7 habits of an ineffective person. On the right-hand side, you're going to see the habits of an effective person. Right? So if you take a look at some of these habits, you say, I can't do it. Habit number 2, you see there the way this second habit, this type of person lets life just happen all around them. They let their life go on without purpose, and that's not the way that we want to go about things. Or in habit number 3, you end up doing things that simply aren't good for you. You do things that harm you. So you can see all of those, okay? So if we continue on, we get to the point where we're not taking care of ourselves, right? But ultimately, we'd like to get to where these habits have us being effective people. And you can see some of those on that right-hand side. So number 4, you think everyone can win in your relationships, right? Or number 6, you celebrate the differences and work together as a team. So all of these are different things that we can develop over time, and that's precisely what we want to look at. So if we're looking at the next slide, we can see a plane there. Why is there a plane, Louis? Right? So there's a plane here because we want to take a look at our flight plan. So my phenomenal wife drew up this picture. I can't credit for drawing this picture. There's no way. So she drew this awesome picture for us, and this is our flight plan. You can kind of see here. So it has the different habits here, starting from the bottom, right? So if you go to the back of your book, so the inside cover on the back page, you can see there this very thing, this flight plan, and you can write your name at the top of that flight plan. And what is this flight plan all about? So obviously it has our habits, and it has the curriculum that we're going over today. So we start with dependence, right? We depend on somebody else. But basically we want to work on these things, and the Army's called these the private victory because it's working on the things, it's working on ourselves. So being proactive, beginning with the end in mind, and putting first things first. That's what this piece right here, the abbreviated portion of this 7 habits for highly effective soldiers, is all about. But I'm going to mention a little bit about the other 3 here, and we will also do the sharpen the saw. So when we get here, we've reached independence. That's our private victory, and then we do 4, 5, 6, and that's our public victory, because the first 3 deal with us. The next 3 deal with our relationships with other people. And then finally, number 7, sharpening the saw. That's something that we all need to do to maintain our effectiveness. But in that flight plan, why are they doing a flight plan? So essentially, folks, I just learned this not too long ago, but a plane, even when you put it into autopilot, it is off course 90% of the time. 90% of the time. And we say, oh my goodness, thank God the majority of people don't know that fact, right? Because, anything could happen. But no, that's exactly why we have a pilot. The pilot is constantly adjusting, okay? And that's what we want to get out of this. Are there going to be times that we get off course? Yes, absolutely. There will be, right? But with these habits, we can hop back on course, right? And ultimately make it a successful flight plan. Okay, so that's why I told you in the back of that book, put your name down. And you want to constantly be reminding yourself, hey, listen, I need to get back on these habits that make me highly successful. Okay, so all right, we'll continue on. So if you take a look at this next slide speaks about the stages of the maturity continuum. Okay, and it kind of has to do with this, and you can kind of see it there. So you have dependence, where you're essentially depending on others, and then you have those first 3 habits. So being proactive, beginning with the end in mind, and putting first things first. Once you achieve those, once you attain those as victories for yourself, you've you've kind of reached that independence stage, and then you have those other four. So thinking win-win, seek first to be understood, or seek first to understand and then to be understood, and then synergizing, right? That's when we begin to work with others. That's that interdependence piece, okay? So as we continue on, so again, we're going to look at those first three habits deeply today, but I'll mention those other ones so you kind of get a good understanding, okay? So we're going to move into that first habit. So let's hop into that first habit. That first habit being proactive, okay? So you can see that on page number 6, okay? So that first habit says be proactive, and it's all about taking control of ourselves, taking control of our actions, okay? So let's take a look at it. So it says there, the principle, it says, I am free to choose. I am responsible for my choices. That's the big goal that we want to achieve here, is putting into our minds that we are free to choose what we do. We are free to choose what we do. Because so many times, we feel like, I just can't control myself during this stage. No, we are free to choose what we do, and we can take control of ourselves, okay? So you got 2 circles there, okay? One says the circle of no control, and then one says the circle of control. So as you're there at your home, I want you to think about 1 or 2 things, and you can kind of write them down there in that circle. So on page 7, you can actually put your name there on that line, and then you can write some things as you're doing this. So what are some of the things that you cannot control? Some of the things that you have no control over, okay? And some of you might tell me the weather, the economy, outside politics. So those are some of the things that are outside of your control. And then I might ask you, what are the things that you have control over? What are the things that you have control over? And you might say, just as kind of I've been mentioning, my actions. And ultimately, those are the big things. That's the big thing that we want to get at today. We can control our own actions, okay? So if we go on to the next slide, you can see there it says shrinking influence, okay? Shrinking influence. And you can see there on the left-hand side, it says, when we are reactive, you give away your control. Your influence shrinks, okay? So when you are reactive, you give away your control. So one of the ways that what being proactive is thinking about what reactive is, right? So if I tell you, so I have we have 2 people, and they're driving down the road. So 2 people are driving down the road, and this guy, they're driving down the same lane, and this guy just completely comes over from the left-hand side and cuts them off, right? And they have to slam on their brakes, right? So how would a proactive person react, right? So I have or how would a reactive person react? So I have this in my hand, right? So this we're thinking about this person as the reactive person. So, and if you guys were sitting here in front of me, I would shake this up, right? And I would ask one of you guys to open it. No, I wouldn't do that. But how would this person react? Some of you might tell me he might blow up. He might go over to that person and try to hit him. Or guys, you've seen all types of road rage stuff, right? So this is how a reactive person would react, right? They wouldn't take the time out to think. And then you think about how a proactive person would react. So if I do the same thing to this, pretending that this is a proactive person, right? So if I shake it up and we ask ourselves to open it, what's going to happen to this? Nothing at all. The person is going to remain entirely the same. They were proactive. They thought about what their consequences might lead to. Is it worth me reacting in any type of way? This is a proactive person, and this is the type of person, not unlike this circle right here. So these circles, when you're reactive, you give away your control. You can kind of see that circle of control, and it shrinks down next to nothing. We want to focus on the things that we can control, right? Because if we look at this next slide, we can see that when we focus on what we can control, we're proactive. We take control of ourselves, and our circle of influence grows right along with us, and we are happier. We are more effective in the things that we can control, and we don't focus as much on those things that are outside of our control. Okay, so as we continue on, we see on this next slide, and we're continuing on, and now we're moving over onto page 7, and you can see there at the top it says, how can I take control of me? How can I take control of me? And we already kind of talked about being a reactive person. It says when you are reactive, there is no space between what is happening to you and how you respond. Okay, so you have something, you have a stimulus. So something that happens, you can see it there, a stimulus or a triggering effect, right? And you respond right away, right? So this is a reactive person, and we already mentioned, so that soda bottle might blow up, might try to go, might have road rage, might go after that person, or might try to pull the person out of that car, something crazy like that. So a reactive person, somebody who's reactive, they act based on impulse or on mood. A proactive person acts based upon their values. A proactive person, they act based upon their values. Okay, so again, those things that we spoke about at the beginning, and we said the values are the things that are most important to you, right? Proactive people act based upon their values. If we continue on and we look at the next slide, it says to be proactive. To be proactive, you need to create a space between what is happening to you and your response. So that stimulus or that triggering effect, again, somebody cut you off, right? And then there's a space there. You see, you don't go directly into action. There's a space there. You have freedom to choose. You have freedom to choose what your action is going to be. So we want to be, essentially, we want to be like that water bottle. We want to leave a space there. We want to focus on the things that we can control. So when I think about this, I think about a friend of the family, and I might ask you if you guys are Patriots fans, essentially. So I know if you were here in front of me, I'd probably get a big roar, or some of you might roll your eyes now that Tom Brady's not on the team anymore. But basically, I think about this, and I think about being proactive. I think about a friend of the family who's he's a Patriots player, and I think about him as being a very proactive person, because he once told me, so the way he said, Louis, the way that I'm successful on the football fields is based on a practice that I've adopted over many years. He says that before every single game, he sits down at his locker, and while other guys might be doing other things, he sits down at his locker and he plays the game out in his mind. So before the game happens, he plays out different plays, and he says, if this person does this, this is what I'm going to do. Or if this happens on this play, this is how I am going to act. So some of you might be saying, hey, Louis, in terms of this proactive and reactive thing, sometimes things happen and you don't have time to concentrate on how you're going to act or react, right? So is that being a reactive person? Not necessarily, because I think about this friend of mine, and I've played it out in different times in my life. So he's not going to be able to act out or think about every single play that happens on the football field for that game. But maybe 5 games ago, when he thought about a specific thing, he had already planned it out or had already practiced it on the football field, right? And so he is being highly proactive in all these different things. He is preparing for the what if, what might come, and that's what we want to do. We can prep, and we can focus on the things that we can control to be a more effective person. So if we take a look at this next slide, this is the last slide in this section, and it mentions an inside-out approach. You're gonna see this inside-out approach at the end of every single habit, it's this one is about applying habit number 1. So what is that inside-out approach? That inside-out approach is essentially it's about starting to form our habits from our innermost self. Again, inside out, our innermost self, and it's about our views and our paradigm. So this one says, I am free to choose, and I am responsible for my choices. So we focus on the things that we can control. We're proactive. We focus on the things that we can control, and it's all about that circle. So the seeing, the way we see things, the way we do things, we begin them from how we see them inside, and it essentially it allows us to get big results. So it says there, I have increased satisfaction and control. After again, I see I am responsible for my choices. I choose to act, not to react. And then finally I have increased satisfaction and control. So folks, that's habit number 1. So we'll continue on to habit number 2. Habit number 2 is beginning with the end in mind. And if you look on page 11, if you look there on page 11, that's where habit number 2 starts. And you can see it there. I want you to take a look at that quote down at the bottom. It says, my commitment. And folks, this is what we're committing to in doing this second habit. So it says, I will plan to lead my life by my values and my principles. I will plan to lead my life by my values and my principles. So again, it's referring back to those values that you put down when I told you, hey, write down those 3 things that are most important to you. So beginning with the end in mind. What does that mean? So when I have you guys in person, when I have you folks in person, I would actually put out different puzzles on the table, right? And for one of the puzzles, I might just tell you, hey, just do this puzzle without giving you the box or what it would look like. And I would give you another puzzle, and I would show you what that puzzle is supposed to look like once you finish it. I might ask you, hey, which one do you think you could finish faster? Or which one do you think people finish faster? And ultimately, it's pretty obvious. It's the one that you have the picture. And that's for good reason, because you're beginning with the end in mind, right? So there's an agenda to it, and ultimately it's to show us, right, that when we begin and we focus on having that picture of what we want to accomplish already, we do it a lot more effectively, right? So we want to do that in life as well. So so if we go on to or actually you can see there on page on this slide, it says the mental creation precedes the physical creation. So what we think about, again, it goes back and it begins again with those paradigms. What we focus on has such a big effect on our lives. So the way we think about things affects just as much or more how we go about things, or how we do things, how we accomplish things. Okay, so all right, so if we go on to that next slide, so page number 12, you guys can go on to page number 12, and on page number 12 you see this thing, right? So it says, how do you live with purpose and vision? Okay, so it gives you a little bit of an activity there, and and I want you guys to go about that when you have an opportunity. So, but this is beginning with the end in mind, and it's all about that mental creation, and then that physical creation. So, a fitness program. If you begin and you focus on a fitness program, you write down a fitness program and you dedicate yourself to it, you're going to have a healthy body. So that's the first one, and you can see there's different ones there, that last one. So a detailed blueprint is going to yield you a well constructed house, right? So again, it's just kind of to drive home that mental creation precedes that physical creation. Okay, so on pages 13 through 16, when you folks have an opportunity later on, I want you to go through these pages. And essentially, so from 13 to 16, it has different activities for you to do that you can kind of knock out, and it'll help you towards writing a personal mission statement. There have been, I've had so many different people talk. I've spoken to a lot of different people about this, and so many different people, a lot of successful people that I know, they say one of the biggest things in their lives that has allowed them to accomplish the things that they've accomplished is having a personal mission statement. So this is what do I want to attain in life, and it can be long or it can be short, but it's kind of that driving force for you that allows you to continue on every time that you might feel. Again, we talked about that flight plan. Every time you feel like you're off track, this vision statement helps you continue on track, because it's kind of your driving guidance. It's your end point. You're beginning with that end in mind. That's kind of what that mission statement is. Okay, so and then on page 18. On page 18 is basically where you would do that draft of that mission statement. But if you look on page 17, right? So on page 17, it has some examples of some different mission statements, and you have some long ones, you have some shorter ones. So it says there to play, to laugh, to learn, to love. One of them says, I want to be the kind of person that my dog thinks I am. So that one, I thought that one was pretty funny, right? So our dogs, you guys know, we do all types of stuff, and our dogs love us because our dogs think of us as great people, right? So, and then one of them is the Soldier's Creed, which we all love, we know, we live by. So so when you get a chance, I highly encourage you to do this mission statement. So so if we take a look at that next slide, it's going to be our inside out approach, and it's applying habit 2. So I am the creator of my future. I lead my life by my personal mission statement. Again, we lead our lives by a personal mission statement. And then again, so I have a sense of purpose and meaning in my life. Right? So, and then in there, inside of the principles, so it says mental creation precedes physical creation, which we kind of spoke about. So that's habit number 2, beginning with the end in mind, folks. Beginning with that end in mind. So if we have a picture of what we want to accomplish already, it's going to be much easier to obtain it. So you want to get down that mission statement so you know exactly what you want to attain. It's much more easier when we have it that way. So write down that mission statement when you have an opportunity, all right? So that's habit number 2. And we'll continue on to habit number 3. So habit number 3 is putting first things first. Putting first things first. The principle in this one is that success requires the discipline to act on my priorities. So this one is all about action. It's all about that action, right? So getting the things done that we have to get done, and this is kind of that overarching principle in this one. In these different habits, this is the big one right here. It's getting done those things that we need to get done in order to be successful. So if we go to that next slide, it says big rocks versus little rocks. And you can read there, it says the big rocks are the most important things that we need to do. And then the little rocks are the less important things that we need to do. And oftentimes those little rocks get in the way of those big rocks getting accomplished. So if you were sitting here in front of me, I'd literally give you a cup, one of those activities. I'd give you a cup, and I'd give you little rocks and big rocks, and I'd tell you, hey, you have to get all of these rocks into this cup. And I'd see a bunch of different people trying a bunch of different techniques. Some of you may have seen this already, but ultimately the technique for getting it done would be you put the big rocks in, and then all the little rocks, you dump them in, and they just kind of fill their way around the big rocks. But the big principle there is to accomplish the things that you need to get done first. Get those big things done. So you have this on page 21, but as you flip over onto page 22, and write down. So on page 22, I want you to write down your some of your big rocks for next week. Write down one of your big rocks for next week. So one of the things that you haven't been getting done, one of the things that you haven't accomplished that you're going to accomplish this week, okay? And then over on that right-hand side, so for the little rocks, you're gonna write down some of the little things that you want to cut out so that you can get those big things that you need to get accomplished done, all right? So I'll give you a second to do that, and then we're gonna take a look at the next slide. So that next slide is called the time matrix. The time matrix, all right? So this thing looks real convoluted and it looks all kinds of confusing. So there's different, they have different quadrants, and like an x-axis and a right axis, and a y-axis rather. So, but essentially you can kind of see they're important, urgent, not important, not urgent, and then there's 1, 2, and 3, and 4. So these are just the quadrants for time-wise. In a week, guys, we have 168. We have 168 hours. What does that equate to in minutes? That is 1,000 or 10,000. I'd ask you my math geniuses in the class if you guys were with me, but it's 10,080 minutes. Seems like a lot. It seems like a lot. But essentially, when we get down to it, you folks know exactly how it is. We get down to the end of the week, we say, where did my time go? Where did my time go? So that's kind of what this wants to draw attention to, the time matrix. So we have the important and the urgent, that's quadrant number 1. The important, not urgent, quadrant number 2. So basically, when we get down to it, you have number 3 and number 4. So when we get down to it, folks, we want to live in quadrant number 2. We want to live in quadrant number 2. That's our efficiency quadrant. It says planning and preparation, education, training and development, relationship building, and renewing yourself. You can see it here, and you actually have it on page 23. You can also see it there on the slide. So block number 1, these are the important and the urgent things. They often come up. We got to get these done, right? But if we're proactive, we can be in this block or in this quadrant less often. So if we plan and if we prepare things ahead of time, we'll be in this block a lot less often. So if we go get regular tire rotations, for example, you can see there a flat tire, we'll have flats less often. Might you get a nail? Yeah, for sure. And then you got to get it done, right? That's one of those urgent things. But if we're proactive, we'll be in this quadrant a lot less. Quadrant number 3, folks, these are our distractions. We want to stay away from these distractions in quadrant number 3. And then finally, folks, when we get the things done, we all look forward to that weekend, right? So ultimately, in that block number 4, an hour or 2 to watch a movie, kind of just resets us, right? It resets us for that next week. But ultimately, again, we want to be in quadrant number 2. We want to be as efficient as possible. as often as possible. So that's that time matrix. If you for So on page 24, the steps for block planning. So identify your big rocks. I want you guys to take a look at this as much as possible. You have some examples there, but then on page 25, you can actually write these down. So you have some of the big rocks on page 24 and then some of the little rocks on page 25. And I want you guys to identify some of these to make yourselves more effective. What are the big rocks that I need to put in as a soldier, as a friend, as a family member, or for my family and for my job, and then for me. Identify those quadrant number 2 things that you want to get done, and these would be your big rocks. And then on this next slide, you can see again the steps for goal planning. You can identify your quadrant number 3 and quadrant number 4 things that you want to minimize. That's on that page 25. Eliminate those, right? So you can either write some of these down as I'm kind of mentioning them to you, or come back later on. Because again, this is that habit for action, which we know is the big thing that we want to do, right? So we can talk all we want, but it's actually putting in that action, putting in that work that makes us effective. Okay, so and then finally, so if as we go on and we move towards greater stability, we can kind of see on this slide. So we can we'll either live in chaos, or we'll move to greater stability. So we want to constantly be adjusting our game plan, adjusting our actions so that we are more effective each and every time. And so you have this on page 26. On page 26, you can see this slide. So you guys can see that that second one. It says isolate yourself from others. Is living in chaos. As you move towards greater stability, you're going to do small acts of kindness. And then you can see just a little later on down there, it says being dishonest. And then just the exact opposite of that, being honest, right? So when you get a chance, I really like these. So on that page 26, you can see there, you can take a personal assessment. So it's a little test of yourself. And you can kind of see, so it says, I keep promises, yes or no. Really be honest and really test yourself. And you'll kind of know essentially what you need to work on. What are some things that need to become big rocks for myself? All right. So then finally, so again, that inside out approach. So it says right there, right in the middle, success requires the discipline to act on my priorities. Success requires the discipline to act on my priorities, even when we don't want to. We gotta get those things done. We cannot allow those little rocks to take over, which so often they just do. It's so easy to go away from good habits, so easy to let in bad habits, but we need to ensure that our actions continue to be there day after day. If we fall off, we hop back on and we make sure that we continue on even when we don't want to. Again, success requires the discipline to act on my priorities. And that, folks, is habit number 3, right? So we've gone through the primary ones for this private victory, those first 3 habits, which focus on the self. And that's really what this curriculum is all about. But I'm going to go really quickly over the other 3. So that habit number 4, 5, and 6. 7 is kind of separate. It's actually included in this, but I want to go over these other 3 so you get a good idea of them. Think win-win, seek first to understand, then to be understood, and synergize, right? So habit number 4 is that think win-win, okay? Think win-win. And what is it all about? You can kind of see there the principle. It says successful long-term relationships require mutual respect and mutual benefit, right? So often in our culture, it's kind of like in order for me to win, you have to lose, right? So this curriculum wants to have you think differently than that, right? So if it's kind of that team attitude. If you win, that's a good thing for me. That's a win for me as well. And you can see that on page 29 where they have this habit. You can see that that commitment there. It includes, yeah, for sure it includes you, but it's having that team mentality. Somebody else wins, I win as well, right? So if we go on to that next slide, you can see the 4 ways of thinking, okay? And those 4 ways of thinking: lose, win. And they utilize a remote. You can kind of think about it as a TV remote. It says you get the remote and I get nothing. You win, I am a loser. Again, that mentality. If you win, I automatically lose. So that's lose, win. And then we have if you look across there, right? So it says win, lose. It says I get the remote and you get nothing. We don't have enough for both of us. It's impossible for both of us to win, right? I have to have the remote in order for me to win, and you end up losing, okay? So if you look down from that first one, or just to the left of that win-lose, you see the lose-lose, right? So kind of like, if I'm going down, guess what? You're going down with me, okay? So, and that's obviously not the right one. And then we have that win-win. So what does that win-win look like, guys? So you and I decide together to turn off the TV and play cards. It's not about you or me. It's about both of us. Or we can both choose something that we both kind of like, right? Something that we can both agree on, or something that we can both enjoy. So one person doesn't automatically have to lose in order for the other one to win. We can have mutual wins in this together. All right, so habit number 5, and for us guys, this is the easiest one, huh? So I obviously say it in jest because we so often we like to speak, and we like to bring about the resolutions for things as opposed to understanding, and that's a big stereotype, but nonetheless. So here we go. This goes for all of us, okay? So we will seek first to understand and then to be understood. Seek first to understand and then to be understood. So the principle says to communicate effectively, we must understand each other. We got to understand each other, folks, in order to just give that value to that person that the person desires, that the person needs. So I wrote here, people like / they need to know they're heard and understood. It is an innate a desire. It is a necessity within us in order to be understood, to feel like we have value, and we can do that for each other, right? And when we do it, it opens up everything for better communication, right? So this one is this habit is all about that listening principle, listening to others, seeking to understand them first before we are understood. And so often, and it's not a bad thing, again, because we want to be understood, so we want to hop in there and give our piece, say our piece. But it is so important, so valuable to understand the other person, because once they have that, again, it just opens up the door for you to be able to express your piece so much. So again, we're gonna cover this one quickly. So, but if we go to that next slide, it says, how can you listen for understanding, right? So, and you can see the top there, that tip of that iceberg, and we all know. So, the tip of the iceberg is only just a little bit. All this stuff is down below. So it says listening is a 10% skill. Listening is a 10% skill, so we can develop it by studying different things, but then the rest of it, folks, is just wanting. It's just wanting. So it says, and it's having this attitude. And not just having this attitude, we can let people know. So it's a you matter to me attitude. It is a you are important to me, and you are not to be compared with anybody else. So it's all about this attitude. And again, it's only 10% skill. It is actually just doing it and listening to other people. So if if we go on in terms of the inside out approach and applying that habit 5, so it says in C, it says, I seek to listen first to understand, and talk second in order to be understood. So Native Americans used to have this big time. So the talking stick, and we learned it when we were children. They pass a talking stick around, and when somebody has the talking stick, they're the only ones that can speak. The only speaking that somebody else does is in order to let the other person know that they are being heard. So reaffirm or restate what they're saying in order to affirm to them that you understand what they are saying. Okay? And it only gets passed to the next person once that person feels like they are entirely understood. If we carry this out in our communication, in our conversations, folks, our communication would be so much more effective, would go up so many echelons, and we can think about this at so many different levels. The people who at times have the most power are it's almost like they regress in terms of their communication. They need to go back to this, and again, it's only 10% skill. They need to go back to that desire to understanding one another. So so that's the C piece. The do piece, it's I use empathetic listening skills. And this is the listening skills piece, right? So this is that 10%. So what are some of those skills? So it's one of them is avoiding door slammers, right? And what are those door slammers? When you are seeking to understand somebody, and this is something that we do a lot, right? So one of them is criticizing. We gotta leave criticizing out. Gotta leave it out. When somebody is speaking to us and they're trying to tell us something, and we're seeking to understand them, criticizing is a big time door slammer. It will shut down the conversation. It'll shut down the trust. So leave criticizing out. Just seek to understand the person. The second one is talking about self. This is appropriate at certain times, but the majority of the time when there are emotions involved and somebody's trying to tell you something, usually talking about self isn't the appropriate time. There may be appropriate times later on down the line once that person feels like they've been understood by you already. And then giving advice. Again, there is a time and place once the person feels like they've been understood by you, but not initially right away, right at the beginning, as soon as they tell you something. And this is something that we, not just guys, but this is something that we guys, males, often fall into this trap because we are so conditioned, we are so preconditioned to accomplish things, to fix things, right? That fix situations, fix different things, literal things that we want to fix every single problem that somebody brings to us. But the advice piece, when somebody asks you for advice, that's the perfect time. Otherwise, we want to just listen for understanding, right? So, and then finally, get. I achieve mutual understanding, right? So, and again, we'll go back to our principle. It says, to communicate effectively, we must first understand each other. Go into it, and then so I'll finish this. We've heard this before. All of you have heard this before. So, but there's a reason why we got 2 ears and why we got 1 mouth. We want to do twice as much listening as we do speaking and it goes a long way towards understanding each other and towards understanding the person that we value, that is trying to bring us something. So that's habit number 5. Habit number 6 is synergize. Synergize. And what is synergize, right? So synergize, it says there, the principle is the sum, or the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. That's our principle for the synergize piece. It says the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So synergize, what is synergize? Synergize is when different people bring their skills together in order to achieve something better, to achieve something greater than they would have by themselves, right? So that's what we have in this principle, that synergize piece, and we'll take a look at it a little bit closer. So if we go to that next slide, what synergy is and what synergy is not. Synergy is not tolerating differences. It is celebrating the differences. It is not working independently. It is teaming together. Not thinking that you're always right. Guys, I know we have a difficult thing with this, and we're all sitting there and saying, no, there's no way. I don't have that mentality. I don't always think I'm right. But folks, if we realize it, and this isn't a bad thing, it can become a stumbling block when we're trying to work together as a team and achieve something better. We got to recognize that that we attain so much more by working together as a team, by recognizing that it's not just what I think, it's what all of us think together, and how can we achieve something better by all of us doing it together. So it is not compromising, it is finding new and better ways. Finding new and better ways. So the military, we're either soldiers or airmen in this, or another type of service member, right? So or a civilian, but all tied somehow to the military. So the military is the perfect example for this. There's a reason why the military resembles the overall greater community of people out there. It is because the military has recognized, more than likely better than anybody else, that it takes different viewpoints to achieve things in the most efficient manner. It would be highly boring and it would be highly inefficient if all of us looked the same, and if all of us had the same exact idea towards things. We wouldn't get things accomplished, or we would only get them accomplished in one certain way, which more often than not would be very inefficient. So when we do things together and we find the best way to do things, we achieve synergy. We achieve things that are better than if we just did them by ourselves. So folks, that's habit number 6. That's synergy. It says again, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So in the C, I value the differences of others. In the do, I seek the third alternative, because again, we're working with one another. And then finally, I achieve better solutions. When we work together and we realize that all of us pooling together achieve something better than we would solely on our own. Folks, those are habits 1 through 6. I ran through 4 through 6 a little quicker, but again, it's because they aren't usually included in this. I encourage you to get the book 7 Habits for Highly Effective People when you have an opportunity, so you can check some more of these things out. But finally, we're going to knock out sharpening the saw. Okay, so sharpening the saw. So sharpen the saw. Habit number 7. That's starting on page number 37. Page number 37. So the principle for this one is to maintain and increase personal success, I must renew my whole person, body, heart, mind, and spirit in a balanced way. Okay? So if you folks were sitting here with me right now, I'd be playing you a video, and in this video, there's a guy at the beginning, and we have a gentleman who's in the woods, and we have another gentleman who comes up to him, and this first gentleman is using a saw to cut down a tree, right? And the second gentleman that walks up to him to ask him, "Hey, what are you doing?" And he says, "Well, I'm sawing down a tree." And the second gentleman asks him, "Well, you must have been doing it for a while." And he says, "Yep, I have." And then the other gentleman says that saw or that blade must be pretty dull by now. And he says, "Yep, it is." And he says, "Well, you should take the time out to sharpen it." And the gentleman says to him, I can't. I don't have the time. I have to keep on sawing down the tree." And you folks kind of get the principle. Essentially, it's we have to take the time out in order to do things. So I know I have some leaders on this conference, and as leaders or as people in general, sometimes we get so good at certain things that we forget to take the time out to grow and to continue sharpening our saw, or we get so complacent that we don't take the time out to sharpen the saw. We have to stop what we're doing at times and continue sharpening our saw so that we can be as effective as possible. So polishing those things, polishing those skills that we've been doing, we got to continue doing it. I have this mentor who said to me, and I fully adopted it. He said, once you stop improving, you're no longer good. And I believe that principle carries through for every facet of our lives. The only way that we can improve, or the only way that we can get better, is by continuing and looking how we can improve all those different things, especially the ones that we're good at, the ones that make us excellent in an area. We got to continually look to improve those. So if you look at this next slide, it says, how well do you sharpen the saw, right? So how well do you sharpen the saw? We all have these four parts: the mind, the emotional piece, the heart, the physical, which is the body, and then finally the spirit. Basically, essentially, if we neglect any of these, we neglect the whole person. Okay, if we neglect any of these, we neglect the whole person. So as you're doing this, if you look, oh, I'm sorry, I told you that this habit started on page 37, but that's synergized. This one actually started on 41. So as you're looking at this, those four areas are on page 43. But if you flip over to 44 and 45, I want you to go into this section right here and put down on this. Really be honest with yourself, and I want you to write down the things that you are doing. These are what are you going to commit to? What should you commit to for your mind, or for your body, for your heart, for your mind, and for your spirit, that are going to make you more effective? Okay, how are you going to sharpen your saw in each one of those four areas? And then on the other side, I want you to write down something that you need to stop because it is affecting you negatively in each one of these four areas. Okay, so these are the sections that I really like in this habit. So and then on page 46 and 47, I want you to give yourself a little test. So it says, am I sharpening the saw in a balanced way, right? So it asks, so some of the things in the physical, that first one, it says, I eat food that is good for me. So, and then you have the choices, rarely, sometimes, or frequently. So write these down and you'll see exactly, oh, okay, this is the area. This is one area or two where I need to sharpen myself. Okay, so then finally, so in this last one, the inside out approach, apply habit 7. So to maintain and increase personal success, I must renew my whole person in a balanced self. And you'll know it based off of this. Okay, so finally, this last one, the inside out approach, or our flight plan. Folks, you've completed your flight plan. You've completed your flight, the training piece of it. Now, again, I told you, a lot of these principles you would know. The biggest piece about it is actually going in, is making sure that you put them into practice. Okay, that you put them into practice. I hope you've enjoyed the training. Again, I hope that you can come out. We do different curriculum. I hope that you can come out one of these days for one of our strong bonds, our in-person strong bonds. I wish it wasn't like this, but this is our COVID way of doing this training. But I hope you can come out, to one of the hotels when we do this in person. Bring your family out, and you can enjoy it in person. So again, this is 7 Habits for Highly Effective Soldiers or Airmen, and I'm glad that you joined us from the chaplain's office of the Massachusetts National Guard. We're praying for you, and we're hoping for the best for you. And so we'll sign off for now, and we'll hope to see you in person soon. Take care. Bye-bye.